So today's broadcast is sponsored by Efi Nussbaum, Le'ilu Nishmas, his mother, whose yortzeit is today, Gela Shosha Bas Moshe Zeller. And Hashem should have an aliyah. Rab Shaman Bar Abba Rab Yochanan. So yesterday we discussed different nadins that are brought in by the Kala and how they're evaluated and what the reaction of the chassan has to be to them. So we discussed that if she brings in currency or cash that he could easily invest, he automatically has to write in the ksuba that he's going to give her $1.50 for every dollar received. So if she brings in $100,000 of cash, he has to write into the ksuba that he's giving her back, in the event of the marriage breaking down, $150,000. If she brings in goods, standard goods that are normally assessed with an inflated value to make everything look good at the time of the wedding, then he only obliges himself to 80%. First of all, they're goods, they're not cash, so he can't easily make money with them and invest them, and therefore there's no premium of 1.5, but being that they're overvalued during their assessment, he doesn't even have to oblige himself in this ksuba to give her back that amount. It's only 80 cents on the dollar. That's the second rule we learned. The third rule we learned is if there was a proper assessment done, not by the wedding, not by the engagement, rather maybe they had an insurance assessment, an appraisal done, that was a legitimate assessment, that is dollar for dollar, he has to oblige himself. So today we're going to learn about gold and what its value is and how it's perceived, and therefore how much the reciprocal gift in the ksuba will be back. So she brought gold into the marriage. Now gold could come in many forms. So Rashi tells us that the gold that we're talking about are not coins, it's chatichas, pieces of gold. We can call them gold bars, but not currency. So what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Shaman oisoi barei keshavya. That he pays back its value. So we don't look at it like it's cash, where he has to give back 1.5. We don't look at it like it's regular assets, where we reduce his chayvus back. Rather, it's reciprocated dollar for dollar. Meisvei. So the Gemara has a challenge to what we quoted from Rabbi Yochanan. The Brisa says, Hazav gold, harehu kekelim. It's just like kelim. My love, kekelim shel kesef. Let's say it's like kelim shel kesef, which means any other kelim. Kelim are considered standard assets. Standard assets you reduce by 20%. The paxi, because they get degraded. So right over here, we have a kasha on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said pieces of gold is dollar for dollar, yet over here the Brisa says that a piece of gold is treated like any other asset, which he's able to reduce the value when he reciprocates in the ksuba back. So Dr. Gemara, no, that's not what the Brisa means. What it means is loy kekelim shel zav, the loy paxi. When it says zav arego kelim, it means zav is like not regular kelim, it's like kelim of gold, and kelim of gold retain their value. Frank the Gemara, then it's a very weird way of saying it. The Brisa should have said zav hareu kikel yoy. Zav is just like gold kelim. By saying hareu kelim, which means generic kelim, its connotation is such that it means silver kelim. So in case kikel yoy miboyele, it shouldn't have said, the Brisa shouldn't have said zav hareu kikelim. It should have said zav hareu kikel yoy. Gold is like kelim made out of gold, which means it doesn't get degraded. So that's kasha number one on the Rabbi Yochanan. The simplest understanding of the Brisa that we just quoted seems to indicate, in fact, that even gold pieces we consider overinflated, and when he's mechayiv himself back in the ksuba back, it's only 80 cents on the dollar. V'oitanya, and I'll prove to you from another Brisa that, in fact, the Brisa that we just quoted has to be speaking of kelim shel kesef, and in fact that it is degraded. Why? Because the Brisa says as follows: Zahav, gold, harehu kekelim. It has the din of kelim, and we're going to want to prove that this kelim here also must mean kelim of kesef. Din rezav, What if you have dinarim? So dinarim sounds very much like you have coins, which means you have actual currency. Harei and kiksafim, they're like any other money. Money, we know that you actually give back a premium. For every dollar you receive, you give back $1.50 in the ksuba. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he argues on the Tanakama. And from Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel's argument, we're going to figure out exactly what the Tanakama is talking about. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he's talking about some type of gold. When the minig is that that this gold is not used as currency, they're treated with their own value. It's a one-to-one. It's a one-to-one ratio. So, frankly, Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Rab Shimon ben Gamliel is making a comment on the Tanakama. But the Tanakama made two comments. His first comment was Zov Harei Ukakelim, and the second comment was Dinare Zov Harei Tiksafim. So, on which of these two comments is Rab Shimon ben Gamliel commenting? Ahaya, Ilema Seifa, if he's going on the Seifa. So the Tanakama said that gold coins are like any other currency, meaning the chasna has to match it with a 1.5 ratio. Michlal, that would tell us the Tanakama sabar afilu b'mokim shenoagu shaloi lefarton. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is saying, in a place where these gold coins aren't really treated as currency, they're more like collector's items, and they're not normally exchanged for other currencies. They're there. We don't consider them currency, and that's Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel arguing on the Tanakama. I mean, the Tanakama must hold that you treat it like currency, even though it's not a normal currency. That's not logical. Halanafki. Why would the Tanakama say that gold coins that aren't treated as currency, they're more like a product? Why would the Chachamim say that there's a 1.5 premium on them? It's not logical. It's the whole point of it, of the 1.5 premium, is cash is ready to be invested. But this type of gold coin, which is more like a collector's item, where you can't just go to the bank and cash it in because it's worth so much more than its face value, and it has to be assessed. So that's not so easy to invest. So why is there a 1.5 ratio according to the Chachamim? And a lava ratio. So we're forced to say that dinar is, when the Tanakama says that dinar is of Harei Kiksafim, it means, of course, only if it's like regular currency. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is not arguing on that. Everybody agrees, gold coins, it's regular currency. Of course, you treat it like regular money. Rabbi Shimon was arguing on the ratio, the first comment that the Tanakama made, which was Zov, pieces of gold, Harehu Kekelim, is like Kalim. So now let's analyze the Machlokes Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and the Tanakama when we're talking about pieces of gold. And this must be the discussion. The Tanakama said, Zahav Harehu Kekelim. Zahav is like Kalim. And what type of Kalim? This is the same question we had before. My Kalim, Kalim Shel Kesef. The simplest understanding of Kalim is Kalim Shel Kesef, which means it's like any other asset, which he could reduce its value and only give back 80 cents to the dollar. And on that, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel argued, Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Harehu Kedinin Shel Zahav. Even Dinim Shel Zahav, what is the status of a dinar, a coin of gold, where it's not used as currency? We say it's 1 for 1. Gold always has a 1 for 1 ratio. So Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is arguing on the Tanakama. Pieces of gold, the Tanakama holds we degrade it, and he only gives 80 cents to the dollar. And Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel holds it's dollar for dollar. Well, that's going to pose a problem, because what did Rabbi Yochanan say? Rabbi Yochanan said that it's dollar for dollar. That will be inconsistent with the Tanakama. It might be consistent with Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, but it's inconsistent with the Tanakama. So why would Rabbi Yochanan say that gold pieces are evaluated dollar for dollar when the Tanakama says that it's only 80 cents to the dollar? Zok the Gemara, loy, we won't be able to learn like this in the Brisa, because in fact it does cause a problem for Rabbi Yochanan. So let's say lo'olam ha-seifa. Let's say, like we originally thought, which didn't work out, was a seifa, which means the Tanakama said that if you give dinare zahav, if you give golden coins, they have the status as regular currency, where he has to give 1.5 for every one he got. And on that, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said, what was the problem? The problem was, how could the Tanakama say that even if these gold coins that you have aren't really good currency, you still consider them like currency and you pay 1.5? It doesn't make sense to say that, because the fact of the matter is you can't just go swap them for other monies. You have to assess them. So it should have the status of a product, not as a coin. So the Gemara, I'll tell you what the case is. It's udenafki al yidei atcha. When the Shimon ben Gamliel said that the Mokum shenahagu shaloi lefarton, in a place where they're not regular currency, they're treated like a regular asset of gold, which is 1-to-1. The Chachamim argue because it's not a coin that you cannot ever possibly use as currency. It was a coin that was accepted, but not everywhere. It was difficult to cash it in. So therefore, the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel is an assessment. When you have a golden coin, that's not so easy. It's not like a regular coin. It's much more difficult to cash in, but with effort, you can find a changer that will do it for you. Is that considered cash? And therefore, there's a 1.5 premium, which is the opinion of the Tanakama, or is it considered product? And it's a 1-to-1 ratio, because it's a product of gold, which we say is not overvalued. And this would be the machlokes between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Tanakama. The Tanakama holds it's not easy, but you could cash it in. Therefore, when you reciprocate in the Ksuba, it's 1.5 for everyone. Since it's not as easy to cash in, it's not as easy a product to invest like regular cash would be. We do not have to give a premium. The chassan only has to give back 1-to-1. Now, once that's the case, then the Reisha, the first comment that the Tanakama made, is as follows. The first comment that the Tanakh says is Zov Hareu Kakelim. What does Zov Hareu Kakelim mean? It could mean Zov Hareu Kakelim of Zov, and therefore it's a 1-to-1 ratio, which is not contradictory to Rabbi Yochanan, which means Rabbi Yochanan is in fact consistent with the Tanakama that gold products are assessed on a 1-to-1 ratio. That's one option of how we could understand the Brisa.
Yosy, it seems like I have the teacher all for myself today.
No, you don't.
Who's there? Who's in the classroom?
I see you're not looking at the video camera.
Oh, okay. But what if the gold fluctuates in value? It seems here that gold doesn't. The Gemara is assuming that gold doesn't have any. Will always retain its value.
Okay, so that's a very important point you're bringing up, because the Rishonim discuss what is this degradation that we're talking about. So there's actually 2 points where they're going to degrade. A is the actual assets will degrade, and B is its value drops. And what you're suggesting is gold, like any other commodity, will go up and down. But it doesn't seem from the Rishonim that that's what they're concerned about. They're more concerned about the assets physically degrading. And silver degrades because it's used much more regularly. Gold is used much more sparingly, so generally it won't degrade. That's what Tosha said.
So that's the same thing. So if the asset how long does it have to retain its value? That's what you're saying. The Rishonim are saying when you give it was
definitely. It has to retain its value indefinitely. Because Tosha explains like if it's jewelry that she wears every day, that's going to get worn out very quickly. But if it's like bechers that you use infrequently and they'll last forever, that's the type of gold that we're talking about, where it's a 1-for-1. So this actually opens up a whole new avenue, because until now, the only reason why I thought that it's 80 cents to the dollar is because they try to hype up the value and they overinflate the value when they're evaluating it at the chasna to make everybody look good and look richer. Now we see a whole new avenue as to why you only have to oblige yourself 80 cents to the dollar on product. And that's because the product will lose value as well. It's a new thing that we didn't see yesterday. Okay, so that's the Gemara. So at the end of the day, where we're holding right now is that, in fact, Rabbi Yochanan, who says that gold, I pay back dollar for dollar, in fact, gold that I pay back dollar for dollar is consistent with the Tanakama, and the machlokes between the Tanakama and Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is about a gold coin that's not easy to liquidate. Do you consider that currency, and there's a 1.5 premium, which is the Tanakama, or do you consider it product and it's a 1-to-1 ratio?
It's difficult to liquidate, but once you liquidate it, you can invest it.
Yeah, but any product you want to liquidate, you can invest.
Yeah, so why would it be?
Because something that's easy, you only have to pay 1.5 if it's ready to be invested. If you have to immediately. That's right. That was the justification behind it. Rashi mentioned in the Mishnah that's the difference between cash versus any product that would have to liquidate. It's much easier to jump into an investment with cash. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Iba Yisema, we actually have another way that we could learn that brisa that was causing us problems. The machlokes Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Rabbanan, and we can argue that Kula Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. In fact, there's no machlokes in that brisa. The whole brisa is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So let's just quickly review the brisa in question. Zav harei kukelim, dinare zav harei kiksafim. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel Emer, b'makom shenhagu shaloi lefarton, shomen oison, harei b'shavyayim. At first glance, it seems very much like this is a machlokes. Reb Shimon is only interjecting his opinion in the middle of the brisa. But the Gemara here wants to propose that maybe the whole brisa is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, but the chisur mechsura, we need to edit it a little bit. V'hachi katani, and this is what we would learn. Zav harei kukelim, gold is like kelim. Dinare zav, so zav, regular gold, is like kelim. Dinare zav, but currency of gold, harei and kiksafim, that's like cash, and there's a 1.5 ratio. But medvar mamur, where do we say currency is like gold coins is like cash? When it was part of the normal currency out there, that would be easy to change in for regular cash. But in places where gold coins were not considered like regular currency, you'd have to assess their value by rayen b'shaviyayin, and they would be assessed on a 1-to-1 ratio. Diver Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. All of the above is Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel Omer, in a place where even if you have a gold coin, but it's not regularly changed, Shamin Oisam, you assess its value, and the Chassan only has to give back a 1-to-1 ratio. Zok to Gemara, this is all a very nice shot, but we still are stuck on one word. So even if you want to learn shot in this brisa that Meisvei Azav Hareu Kelim, and you want to say it means Kelim Shel Zav, which means you assess it on a 1-to-1 ratio, and not Kelim Shel Kesef, which would be a reduced ratio, it's still shver the Lashon Hareu Kelim, because Kelim means generic Kelim which are degraded, and you're trying to learn shot in this brisa that it means gold Kelim, so it should say Zav Hareu Kelim. There's no difference between a gold bar and a keli made out of gold. But it doesn't say that, so that's still a difficult way, a difficulty in explaining the brisa that it's referring to kelim of zav. Kasha, yes, it is a kasha, and we'll have to live with. Or Ibai Sema, I have another option where we could even answer that kasha. So let's see what this means. Rabbi Yochanan said if she brings in gold, and Rashi says, what type of gold was Rabbi Yochanan talking about? Pieces of gold. We're assuming it means larger pieces of gold, like gold bars. There, Shaman Oisai, Hareu Keshavya. That's 1-to-1. Where the Brisa says, Zav Hareu Kelim, it's also speaking about pieces of gold. But it's not speaking about large gold bars. It's speaking about small pieces of gold that broke off a kelim. Those are, in fact, worth less than a gold bar. A gold bar is 1-to-1, whatever it's worth, that's what you put in the tzuba. But a broken off small piece of gold that broke off a keli, that we will say is subject to degradation or to overinflation when you're assessing it, and therefore it's treated like a silver keli, and it's only 80 cents to the dollar. So what we've done here is we've introduced a new category that we weren't thinking of until now. Until now, it was either a gold coin or a gold bar. Now it's a gold chunk, just a broken piece of gold, which will in fact have the status as of a regular keli. Rav Ashi Amar b'mamlo. If you have an art scroll, do you have an art scroll? Is it mamlo, memelo? What is? How do you pronounce the word? You know, I know what it means. How do you pronounce the word?
The number.
Mamla. So mamla is gold dust. So gold dust is even less valuable than a gold broken piece. And from what I think the art scroll says that a broken piece of gold means you had a keli that was made out of gold. A piece of it broke off. Gold dust is in the raw form. You're in the California gold rush and you found some gold dust, and that's what it's referring to. Although not everybody says that. I think Toys says Zov Anita Mina Oretz Mimotzoi. Gold in its rough form when you find it in the earth. Like I've never found gold in the earth. I don't know what it looks like.
So it's worth less.
I guess so.
Gold can be harder to weigh, so it's more easy to it's easier to miscalculate how much there is.
Okay. So I'm going to be on night. So what we've introduced here is a new concept. We've introduced a type of asset. We've introduced a type of asset that's a gold bar. It's not coins, yet we don't degrade it. So we have coin cash that's so easy to liquidate that you have to give back 1.5. We have standard assets that it's 1-to-1, and then you have inflated assets that it's 80 cents to the dollar. So now we're going to look at different types of products that are so easily traded that we actually treat them like cash. Bisomim of Antuchia, in Antuchia, where it was extremely common to trade in Bisomim, it was almost like a currency, So if she brought in as a Natan $10,000 of Bisomim of Antuchia, he had to put into his ksuba $15,000 because we treat it like cash, and he has to return $1.50 for every dollar that he got. These are camels of Arabia. Once again, these are animals. These are very easy to collect from because they're they're traded regularly. Isha goiva parnomeya. A woman will be goiva her ksuba from it. Rashi says parna means revach shlush. So if she brought that in to the marriage, he has to give her back $1.50 for every dollar worth of gemalim shalaravi that he brought. That's Rashi's shot. Tosfos actually learns that this is speaking about something completely different. Normally, a woman could only collect her ksuba from karka, from nechosim mishubadim. What the Gemara here is saying is gemalim shalaravi are so valuable and so available and so easily traded that a woman would even collect her ksuba from those. Because there's actually a big shaila if a woman could collect her ksuba from that. Like nowadays, what if a person does not have any property at all? He has stocks, he has bonds, he has mutual funds, he has a lot of good investments, he has a lot of good vehicles, but he doesn't have karka. So does that mean if he dies, his wife doesn't get any ksuba? So Tosfos brings down that there was a takana made in the times of the Gaonim that any asset that he has would be available to collect from. So that's what they were discussing over here. What type of assets would a woman be able to collect from in addition to actual hard karka? So that's how Tosfos learns pshat in this Gemara. The Rashi is learning that, which is a continuation of what we're discussing now. Is it considered like cash, which is $1.50 for every dollar?
I understand. In the days of the Gemara, they didn't have anything other than karka as far as investment.
That someone, not really. It was a very much an agricultural society. As a matter of fact, but I actually discussed this with Rabbi Lodi, because nowadays, someone who leaves over all of his Yerusha to his sons is considered a little bit of a jerk and ignores his daughters in Yerusha. And I asked Rabbi Lodi, what's pshat? So Rabbi Lodi told me, and it's brought down in the Rishonim. So B'Yom also showed this to me, the Rishonim. Why is it today the norm that women get the same as girl children get the same as boy children? Where the Torah doesn't say that. The Torah says everything goes to the boy.
The question is, if the Torah says follow, why is he?
So Rabbi Lowy told me that in the early period of the Rishonim, the world changed, and the world used to be completely an agricultural society. So therefore, the whole economy was based in agriculture. So that means if I wanted to support my family, I had to have a field. to work because that's how I supported my family. There was no other types of commerce and business. It wasn't as common. So therefore, the girls, they didn't need to have land. Their husbands would get land. But a boy needed to have land because otherwise, how was he going to support his family? But in the early period of the Rishonim, I guess that would be 1200s or 1300s, that's when commerce started. And international commerce and goods and all these things happened. So the world changed where now agriculture is just one way of making parnasa. Once that's the case, there's no need to give your land to your boys because they can make parnasa with in any other type of way, in any other trade. And therefore, the halachas of Yerusha changed. That's what the Rav told me. So in those days, in the Gemara's days, it was all about agriculture. That was the only thing. Land was the only thing that really had a value. There were, but I guess the norm was only agriculture. Right. Today it's a small percent of people who make their money off land. There's so many other ways to make money.
Then it was overwhelming.
Land.
Over 90.
That's right. And that's why you have to leave your land to your boys.
Give me an argument of why you need to bring in the girls into your Yerusha.
Because really, it's just no. So the default is that it's just that everyone should have. You have to take care of your girls like you got to take care of your boys.
Well, the default is that it goes to the boys.
The default of Yerusha. But we actually learned that a father wants, and it's important that a father should give his daughter things. That's why he should give his daughter an apple. Right? So you see there's the general shita that you got to give the daughter. But the Yerusha of land was going exclusively to the boys.
The sons had to support the daughters.
That's right. But there was also a need to directly divert to the Chasham.
In fact, they had to go and beg.
The sons had to go and beg. That's right. That's right. But that's what we said in the Gemara. The Gemara says, how could I give Nadin? I'm changing the Yerusha that the Torah wants, right? We actually had that discussion. The girls said, I can't give Nadin because then I'm diverting. The Torah said I should give it to the boys. And you want me to give it to the girls? Right? We have that Gemara. The Gemara discusses that. That the Gemara doesn't look at it that way. The Gemara says if you're giving your daughter a big nadin, then it's violating in a certain way the rules of Yerusha because whatever you're giving the girls are not going to go to the boys.
Maybe that was the reason why the Torah said that the Yerusha was only about none.
Well, that's how that Gemara presents it. The Gemara presents it was that nadin was only because there's a pasuk that says you're supposed to make your children desirable to be married, and therefore there's a rebbe in the Torah to change the rules of Yerusha or to circumvent the rules of Yerusha and to give your daughters money and land while they're still alive. Okay, so let's see the Gemara back there. Amar Papi, Hani Tusvi Debei Michsi. These are very expensive clothing, I believe. So they're very expensive things. Isha Goiva Parnamahem. Once again, similar Shalosh. They're very expensive clothing. A woman would also get 1.5. Verma Papi, Hani Saki de Rudja. Sacks of the city of Rudja, they were very common sacks. But actually, de kamchunya and certain ropes. Isha goiva parnameh. So all of these cases, Rashi learns that it means 1.5, and then suddenly Rashi changes. I used to say, these money walls of the mechuzah, they were full of cash. Isha goiva parnameh. And here Rashi changes. It's the same lashon. Goiva parna in all these cases, but here Rashi changes what he learned from Goiva parna. And Rashi says, Lozeh shemati. Here I heard a different shot than the parna of the rest of the Gemara earlier. That it's ksuba menichse yisoimim. You can take the ksuba from nichse yisoimim even though it's not land, it's cash. We don't say that she doesn't have a right to collect it. So Tosfos points out, I don't understand. Why all the parnas you learned, it's referring to giving 1.5 to 1. And suddenly this parna, you have a different pshat. That's why Tosfos learns the entire Gemara is what a woman can collect for a ksuba. Anyway, so we're talking about this anarchy. A woman can go for a ksuba for my timer. Asmechasayu alayu. A woman, when her husband is promising her the ksuba, she is confident and relies on the security of that cash in that bag there. But even the Chazoi, once the Rabban saw that when people have cash, you know what they do with it? The shakli lahu, the nafki, the chimashkechi ara, zavni behu. What do people do with cash? They wait till they find a good deal on the property, and the moment they find the property, they use the cash to buy the property they realize that ultimately, what people ultimately depend on is properties. Alma asmechasayu arahu, and therefore this arniki would not be collectible for a woman ksuba from the Yisraelim. It's only land, and that's why Tosfos says always that we still have this tachkanas agoinim that government metaltal diasmi. Any metaltal, any assets that the Yisraelim have, even if it's not land, an almana has the right to collect her ksuba from. Okay, Zok the Gemara weiter. Hamasias bitoy stam. If a person marries his daughter off and doesn't specify what he's going to equip her with to go into the marriage, lo yifrosh lo mechamishim zuz. He has to buy her clothing for a minimum value of chamishim zuz. So that's him obliging himself to his son-in-law that his daughter is going to come into the marriage equipped with a wardrobe of 50 zuz. What happens if Pasak lachnisa aruma? What if the father-in-law is a cheapskate and he told the son-in-law, I'm making a t'nai and I'm not willing to give her the chamishim zuz. Do you accept her with no clothing at all? So of course he's allowed to do that, and that means the Baal will be mechuyev to be mefarsher. But the question is, can he say, okay, once I make Nesuin, once I take her in, I'll buy her a wardrobe, but I'm not going to buy her wardrobe now. So the halach is lo yomer Baal kisha achnisena levesi, then achaseni b'ksusi, I will clothe her. Once the son-in-law released the father-in-law from the father-in-law's obligation to clothe his daughter, the son-in-law is automatically accepting to clothe her now already, because it's a bezoin that a kala should go to her chuppah not properly dressed. And what if tzedakah is giving money to a yisayma to prepare her for the wedding? The bare minimum is chamishim zuz. And Rashi tells us that means even if the tzedakah does not have the money, the Gabi tzedakah has to borrow money to provide her with a minimum of 50 zuz for her clothing. But if there's more money in the pot, of course you have to give her more. You have to give her a lot more. Amar Abaye said the chamishim zuz, which is the bare minimum that we're talking about, is peshiti. It's not the mo'os tsuri. It's the less expensive money. Mimai. Now it's interesting to note. Let's just finish these lines. Mimai midikatani seifa, like we learned in the seifa, im yesh bekis mefarnesin oisel of. The Mishnah says if there's more money, give it a chivayda. Varmin on my kiss, and we said what's a kiss? Amarachba arnik ishal tzedakah means the tzedakah has to give her more. V'sol kadai the chamishim zuzi mamish. If the minimum is chamishim zuzi, which is zuzi tsuri, which is a lot of money, im yesh bekis kami avinula. How much more are you supposed to give her? If the bare minimum is already considered extravagant, because it's referring to not zuzi pshuti, but zuzi tsuri, so how much more are we supposed to give her if there's more than such an extravagant amount? The bare minimum isn't 50 zuzim of tsuri, rather it's 50 zuzim of pashata, which is 1/8 of that. So the article makes an interesting cheshbon, and he figures out what today's value of these things would be. And he said that chamishim zuzim tsuri today would be between $50 and $100, which is a joke. Because it's a tire ounce. A tsuri is a tire ounce. And we're talking about not even an ounce of silver. So it's very modern. So he brings down a whole machlokes, I believe, between the Tur and the Rivash. The Tur says it must be that in those times, maybe that would have been enough. But as times change, and clearly you need to do more, you have to give a lot more. And this shaila is also used when you give somebody tzedakah, right? The halach is, if a guy has chamishim zuzi, you don't have to give him tzedakah. So the question is, a guy has $50, you don't have to give him tzedakah. How are you talking? So I think you'd be done from the Torah that, of course, that's adjusted according to each generation based on what things cost. But the Rivash, I think you'd be done from the Rivash says, what are you talking about? You're even in the Rivash's times, the Torah already said that it's a lot more than 50 zuz. But the Rivash says, what are you talking about? You probably live in some rich country. I live in a country where we have patch upon patch upon patch upon patch, and most people don't even earn 50 zuz in the year. So for us, it's a lot of money, 50 zuz. So the Rivash said it was dafka, but most people learn that, of course, that has to be adjusted based on the times. Because if you actually looked at that exact amount, it's not too much money.
It's between $50 and
Right, that's a different thing. That's right. That's right. Tanu Rabbanim, Yosem v'Yisoima shabo l'isparnis. What if a Yosem and a Yisoima, they're not, there's a Yosem not necessarily related, that they both had to get married. I'm sorry, this is not getting married. I apologize. This is just they both didn't have food. A Yosem and Yisoima didn't have food to eat. They needed parnos, they needed tzedakah. So the halach is if you only have enough for one of them, mefarnish in a Yisoima, the yachim mefarnish in a Yosem, like you said earlier, right? Right? That's what Rav Zellinger said, right? You said that it's normal for a boy, it's appropriate for a boy to go collecting, vein isha darka lachsar, but it's not appropriate to send a woman to collect money. Yosem v'Yisoima shabo linose. Again, akala Yisoima and a chosin a Yosem. Oh, he's actually not a chosin yet. I don't think he's a chosin because we'll see. But they want to get married. Masin is a Yisoima. The first priority is to marry off the Yisoima if there's a limited tzedakah funds. The acham masin say Yosem only then. Yosem if they should be shosas olisha maruah misholish. It's much more humiliating for a woman to remain not married than it is for a man. Tanu Rabbanan. Really? Oh, wow. Tanu Rabbanan. Yosem shabal lisa. A Yosem that wants to get married. So you don't just give him money for the chasna, you have to prepare him. First of all, soichin loy bayis. First you rent him a house, you have to have a place. Then you actually buy him bed, you buy him furniture. So first you have to set him up with all of the needs that he needs to have to take a wife in. And then you find him a woman to marry and you help marry him off. So you have to give him a lot of money. Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, Have tavitanu. Let me have a look in the pasuk itself. It's the verb tes vav. We just learned it. And it says in the pasuk. Yeah, I'm looking for the actual pasuk. It says in the pasuk right over here. It says. Oh, here it is. It's kifasoyach tivtach es yod chaloi. Open up your hand to him. V'havet tavitenu. It's a double ocean. Day machsoroi, whatever he needs, asher yechsoroi. So we darshan. Shenemar day machsoroi asher yechsoroi. Day machsoroi zahabais. That's referring to the apartment you have to rent him. Asher yechsar zamito v'shulchan. That's furniture. Lo izu isha. V'chenu oimer esa lo ezer kenegdo. So you see, lo is referring to an isha. So you see, not only helping him get married, you have to help him get into a status, into a situation where he could get married. So the today's poskim discuss. You see, there's a chiyuv to give a choshen enough money to rent an apartment. We know that mishalachim come here from Eretz Yisrael all the time, knocking on doors, saying, "I need to buy an apartment for my son, for my daughter." So the question is, the Gemara doesn't say that. The Brisa says you have to rent, not buy. In a chemical, what's the difference? Tzedukah rent doesn't buy. So the poskim say that if it's the norm that people rent, yes, you rent. But in places where it's the norm for people to buy, then that's what you have to do. Then you have to buy. And then there's the shayla is, do you have to buy them an apartment in Yerushalayim on Ezra's Torah, or could you buy them an apartment in Beit HaElit, right? So for that, the poskim say that you're not mechuyev. What? Now that's also expensive. That's right. But the poskim say that you're mechuyev to buy an apartment not in the epicenter. You can buy an apartment out. You can't expect tzedakah to give you money to buy an apartment in the Schmaltz. But of course, they have to give you enough money to buy an apartment in a good, nice Jewish neighborhood where it's appropriate to build a Jewish family. They can't say, well, it's cheaper in some remote moshav where you don't have any infrastructure. That's not what it means. But you have to give with tzedakah money. You have to give tzedakah to someone who's collecting to buy an apartment if that's the norm in that place. Taner Rabbanan, Dei machsoiroi atamatzuva alav lefarnesoi. You're mechuyev to be mefarnes and oni with whatever his needs are. The atamatzuva alav leoshroi. But you don't have to make him rich. You have to give him his needs, but you don't have to make him rich. Asher yechsar loi, whatever he is missing on a personal level, meaning afilu sus lirkoi v'lov. Even if this person was used to, from his childhood, a higher lifestyle where he rode a nice horse, or ve'eved loritz lefonav. He even had an eved running in front of him in his honor. If that's what he was used to, that's what you have to give an honey. Amr alav al Hillel Zaken. They said about Hillel Zaken. He was the nasi, he was the god lador. Shalokach laoni ben toivim echad. He gave an ani who was from a wealthy background, meaning he was used to all these fine trappings. Sus lirkabalov ve'eved loritz lefonav. And now the Gemara says a bam shel chiddush. Pam achas loy mata eved loritz lefonav. He couldn't find an eved Hillel Zaken. V'rotz lefonav shloshim mil. Hillel himself ran in front of the horse of this poor person that he paid for the horse to show covet for this person because this person needed someone to run in front of him. So they all asked. Hillel was a nasi. Nasi shemachal al kavoide ain't kavoide mochel. Hillel could do anything he wants personally, but how could he be mavaz to the position of a nasi and be the runner in front of someone's horse? So there are those who say he did this before he was a nasi, and there are those who say that if no one knows, if he's disguised and no one knows who it is, he's allowed to do it. And there are those who say that if someone is known, even if he's a god lador, but if he's known to do these types of chesadim, it's not a bezoin for him. It's not a bezoin. And the Shiloh was nageh Allah Chalamayse, there was a certain Rav who wanted to play an instrument by the chasana. He wanted to play, he wanted to be Misameh Chasana Kala, he wanted to go to the band and play. And the Shiloh was, is it appropriate? Let's say a Beloy wants to play by the chasana. Shifir wants to play the fiddle by the chasana. There's a pass. So if it's something that he does normally, and we know he's doing it for a chesed, it's 100% allowed. It's not considered a bazar. That's right. So Tana Rabbanon, Ma'aseh B'Anshe Galil Helyo. There were people from the Upper Galil. So I guess that's the Tzfas area. Shalok Kulanu Ben Tovim Echad Mitzifuri. They bought for a ani who was used to the finer things in life, litra basar b'chol yom. They brought him a litra of meat, which is approximately 14 ounces, the Art Scroll says. Litra basar marabusa, 14 ounces of protein per day is not an extravagant amount. You're trying to say a chiddush that they went all out. Why is this so special? Omar Funa, it wasn't regular meat that you buy for a lower price. It's litra basar mishaloifos. It was this type of bird that was very, very expensive meat. So they could have bought him a cheaper protein. They went and bought him the most expensive protein because that's what he was used to. If he buys him the litra basar mamish, they only gave him a litra basar. It was only it was little, but even that's a lot. Rabbi Ashi Omar.
Look at the litra is not the weight of the.
Oh, it means if it's the weight of the coin that he paid for. Right, I'm sorry, but that's what shot. Litra basar mamish means it was a litra, but it wasn't a litra of meat. He took a litra's weight of gold coins or silver coins, and he bought meat with that, which is a lot. Rabashi Amar Hasun Kfar Kotten Hoya B'chol Yoima Have a Mafsed Chiyusa Matulse. No one ate meat in that village, and nobody bought meat. He was the only fellow who needed meat because he came from that background where he was used to it. So they went and shechted an animal and paid the tzedakah, paid the shochet to shecht an animal, and they had to pay for the whole animal just to get him his 14 ounces of meat. So that's a big chiddush, that even though the rest of the animal went to waste, because they didn't have refrigeration in those days, on behalf of this ani, they shechted an animal and all of the meat went to waste. They couldn't unload it, I guess, if not at a great loss, because they wanted to give this ani.
Then the other people didn't share and they didn't eat it.
Well, could be they did, but could be they bought it, they wouldn't pay full price for it. So it was a big loss. Right? But does that make sense? It doesn't make sense that he would have brought it to the Bismillah and said there is less than this.
Maybe the people didn't want the classes to do like this, to be able to eat family eat very simple food. I think classes should be like I don't want to make you
used to it.
So these people also end up.
It's a good. The point that you just brought up, it's not good it's an envoy to these luxuries. We're going to see that in a second. Who does the committee of Nehemiah? Somebody came in front of Nehemiah, a poor person. Omer lay, so Nehemiah said, okay, you want money for food. What do you normally eat? Omer lay, you know what I'm used to eating? Shemen, basar, shomein, and yain yoshem. The nice fatty meat and the most expensive old aged wine. So Rabbi Nechemia said, I'm sorry, I don't have that. But I'm happy to share with you what I do have. Do you want to roll around with me? Do you want to share my meal with me, which is just plain beans? So he had no choice. Gagal imay ba'adoshim umeis. This person who was used to the finest dining ate the crude food that Reb Nechemia gave him, and he died from it. Amar, they said, Oy loy lozeh shahagu Nechemia. Poor guy, Nechemia killed him. Frank Gemara, Nechemia killed him. Adarabba. Oy loy Nechemia shahagu lozeh. I feel bad for Reb Nechemia that he caused someone to die. Mi boiler. That's what you should have said. Ella, there was not an avil that Reb Nechemia did. You know why? Because you who the loy boile lefnuki nafshe kulahai. This wasn't a child who grew up this way. He grew up in a family where his parents didn't spoil him. And he on his own went and upgraded his life. So he messed himself up. And that also explains, didn't we just learn that you're mechuyev to give someone what he's used to? So how come Reb Nechemia only gave him beef? Reb Nechemia should have went and found a way to give him what he needs. The Torah says you're only mechuyev to give a guy what he needs if that's how he was raised and it's in his DNA. But if he grew up normal and it's a gemacht for a shani, that you don't have to give him. You don't have to give him whatever he wants.
Well,
So-
he gave him his own food. He didn't give him, and
Yeah, he gave him his own food. That's right. But he should have. He should have.
I did mechit. It was mechit.
Yeah, yeah.
If you got it, you have to give them to the borrow.
Pashas, yeah. Pashas, the chiv is for every eating environment. But the chiv of being finance, somebody's only forgot what's still the city has to pay money for that. Even the Gabbard who do you get the money from? It's the people of the city who are mechiv to give it. So that's why the Gemara says, "Oy lo lezeh shaharga Nechemia." Woe to him because he brought the death upon himself by getting himself used to these expensive foods that ended up causing him to die. Who does it come to Rava? Amar loy. So Rava asked him, "B'me'ata soid, what do you normally eat?" Amar loy, bitar negoilus petuma with gestopped agains, the yain yoshin and fine wine. Amar loy, that's what you want to demand of the tzedakah fund? Are you not concerned of putting such demands on the tzibur? Amar lei. So he says, I suggest a Meshulach doesn't try to say this in shul. The Meshulach told Rava, what do you think? I'm eating their food? You think it's their money that I'm eating off? It's not their money, it's the Rebbeinu money that I'm getting. The Tanina we learned, it says in the pasuk, we say it in Ashrei, we say this 3 times a day. We look to the Rebbeinu Shalom, but the noisein lahem as achlam be'itai, and you give them all the food at the right time. Be'itam loy nemar. It doesn't say in their time plural. El be'itai referring to each person individually. Malamed shekol echad ve'echad noisein hakadosh baruch hu parnasasa be'itai. Every person gets his parnasa exactly when he needs it. So don't tell me that I'm putting pressure on the tzibur. It comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. As they're having this conversation, Rava didn't see his sister for 13 years, and she came to visit him, and she brought him a gift. What did she bring him? Precisely what that Oni said he wanted. Omar Maidakama. He said, wow, look at what I have here in front of me. Amalus, so Rava said, Nanesi loch, I answered you improperly because I should have also had this saying, Emuna, come and eat from this food that clearly the Rebbeinu Shalom must have sent to you. So Rashi says, what happened there in front of me? I'm never used to getting such fancy meals. My sister came right now. I spoke too much. When you said that it's coming to you, you know what? You're right. You see, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed me that.
You see in the mood that they're also saying as Hamas, that the only he answered, so he answered in these words,
Tanur Ein loy, what if a person does not have money? He needs tzedakah. But the Ein writes but he doesn't want to take tzedakah. So the halach is you give it to him and say, no, we're not giving you, don't worry. We're lending it to you. And then you give it to Shumatana, meaning you never collect on a loan. Divrei Meir. You give it to him l'shumatana, and then you give it l'shumalva. Frank Gemara, We just said he won't accept it. L'shum matana halo shaka. Amarava liftoyach l'shum matana. You should always start by offering it to him for free, because he might be afraid to borrow money. So always first offer it to him for free. If he doesn't want, then offer to lend it to him. How about yeshloi v'neroitzelis? What if someone has money, but he's too cheap, so he'll starve himself to death just not to use his own assets? So the halacha is noisten loy lishum matana. You'll give it to him for a gift because he's happy to take a gift. The chayzun v'nefnor mimenu. Then they go back and collect them. The next time he won't take, and then you haven't solved the problem. Means after he dies, you go to his estate and you ask his estate to pay up what they gave him. Rab Shimon Omer, yeshloi, the ain't a right to list partners. What if he has, but he doesn't want to use his own money? Ain't is loy, you don't help him. Ain't loy, the ain't a right to list partners. But if he doesn't have, then you tell him how we mashkin the toil. You tell him, give us a mashkin and take. Why do you tell him give him a mashkin? Because then he's not so embarrassed because you're lending him money. He'll be more ready to lend money, to borrow money. He should feel more pride. At the end of the day, he doesn't even have a mashkin to give you. So, well, once you started the dialogue, you'll be able to give him money. Tanaraban, Habit. It says Habit Habitena. So what does Habit mean? This is referring to somebody who doesn't have any right to list partners. You give it to Mishum Alvav. So that's why when you're talking about giving money to tzedakah, the Torah uses the lashon Habit, which sounds like a mashkin, like Alvav. And then the chayzun v'nois l'shum matana, of course, you never collect. Tavi tenu, another double lashon. Zesh yesh le v'nois l'shum parnish, shenois l'shum matana, the chayzun v'nafmar mimenu l'achar mitzvah. Well, that's the other shita. Right. So the Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim Marim yesh loy, ve'ein right to l'sparnish had to stop loy, ve'lamayim mikayim tavitanu. You're kasher. So now what do you do with tavitanu? So you don't have to darshan anything from it. Ma'ukva have a ani b'shivavusei. Ma'ukva, there's an ani in his environs. They have a ruggle called yoimo the shadi loy arbazuza b'tinur the dasha. Every day when the ani wasn't looking, he would slide it into his door hinge. Yoim echad amar ezel ichsi man ka'avid bi. Hutivusa. One day the Oni said, I want to say who's doing me this favor. I want to catch the guy. That day, Marukah was a little bit delayed going to the Bishmedrash. Also, the Visabadeh, his wife came with him. Even the Chazuya, the Kamatzla Ladasha, as soon as the Oni saw that they were playing with his hinge, Novak Basrayu, the Oni ran after them. He wanted to see who they were. Wrote Mekameh, they ran away from him. Aile lahu asuna dava grufa nura. They went into an oven. They needed to escape. They shouldn't get caught, so they jumped into an oven. But the oven wasn't cooking anymore. They had already removed all the coals from the oven, so there was no active flame or fire there, but it was still pretty hot. Marukva was standing on this oven with his wife. His feet were burning, but his wife's feet were not burning. Why, instead of standing on the floor of the oven, stand on my feet, and my feet will protect you. Here, Amukar felt bad that my wife is in a higher madrega than me. I didn't achieve that high madrega, that my feet are still susceptible to getting burnt while my wife's aren't. Amalek, she said, I have an advantage over you that you couldn't possibly have, so don't feel bad. Because first of all, I'm the one who's always home, so I have many more opportunities to do chesed than you. And the Makarva Naisi. What are you going to give? You're going to give someone money. I can give somebody prepared food. Those are two advantages that I have that you don't, and that's why I'm zoicha to this. I'm protected from the fire. You shouldn't worry about it. It's two separate things. Also, I'm also doing it more. Umay kulahai. Why did they want to conceal themselves? A big deal. So the guy ran after them so he would see who's getting it. Why did they You're better off throwing yourself into a fire. Kivshon is a smelting oven, not just a fire, rather than embarrass somebody. So here too, they didn't want to make the Oni feel uncomfortable, so it's better if he wouldn't know who's giving him the money. Minolan, where do we know this concept from? that you should even push yourself into a fire to avoid embarrassing somebody. They were going to take her out to burn her to give her shreifa, and she wasn't going to divulge who she was expecting from. All she did was she shared the simonim, and if Yehuda would not have been murdered, she would have been happy to be thrown into the oven. There was an ani who Mar Ukva used to give him 400 zuds every Erev Kippur. One day he sent the money with his son. His son came back. Also, Amar you're giving this guy money. He doesn't need money. Amar my chazos. What did you see that makes you think that he doesn't need money? He was just spraying expensive wine on a fire just to make it evaporate and smell good. Only the uber rich do something like that. So he's doing something that's so rich. Omar, so Mar Ukva said, that's not that forget, and I got to give him more. Clearly, this is someone who's used to a higher lifestyle. I wasn't giving him enough. I knew he doubled up the money that he was giving. Vishadrin the hell, and he sent it away. When Mar Ukva died, Omar, he said, I see Li Chushbenoid the tzedakah. Bring me my book where you would record how much tzedakah I gave. Ashkach Davaksiv Shiva Alpha Dinri Sianki. He gave 7,000 dinarim Sianki, which was an extremely large amount of money. And what he said about that? Omar Zavdoi Kalili. I have such lightweight luggage. In other words, I didn't give enough tzedakah, and I have a long way. I got to go. This has to last me my eternity. The schusim has to last my eternity. I didn't pack along enough schusim. So right away, come bizbizei lepalgim amoyni. He right away gave away half of his estate to tzedakah. How could he do that? Not allowed to give away more than 20%. That's only when he's alive. Because he might lose money and then he'll have to come out to tzedakah. After Misa, once he dies, he's allowed to bequeath it. I don't think that's the right pronunciation of the word. He's allowed to give it to So we actually learned this sugya earlier, and there's actually 5 exceptions to the rule of al livaz yoshim machaymish. The one that we learned today is lachamisa. We also learned for someone who's very, very rich, he can give more. To stay away from an aver, to do a mitzvah, you shouldn't give more than a chaymish. But to avoid an aver, I feel a kol mechasov you have to give. Let me see if I could remember the last 2. There were 2 more. I'm sorry. Oh, that's right. That's right. That's the other one is someone who's doing tshuva and he wants to give an extra donation. So the chadach b'tzedakah paroi, you could buy your freedom of the averis by paying a big amount of tzedakah. That's another time I thought, and I forgot the 5th one. But there's exception to this rule. Okay, it's already 8:02. So have a wonderful day. We should be zoicha to be from the ma'ukvas of giving the tzedakah, and we should never have to be on the other side of the table.
Isn't the Zayda called the Zayda Chud because they have such a story?
I don't remember.